No, not visible.
Okay, okay.
Not visible.
So fine. So I would like to first thank Dr. Kamal Kishore Mishra, the HOD Sanskrit Department, Calcutta University, and the distinguished guest. And I would really thank for this wonderful opportunity that has been offered to me to share some of my understanding on Bhagavad Gita with the distinguished faculty members. Thank you. So this is the Indian knowledge system and Bhagavad Gita. So the objective of this class is to understand how Bhagavad Gita as a pillar of Indian knowledge systems helps to answer some of the modern day problems. That is the objective I have taken and tried to explain that from a Bhagavad Gita perspective. And before I start, I would like to start with a quote, and that quote is from Shankaracharya. The Gita Mahatmya, that is the glories of Gita, has been written by Shankaracharya, and the slok 6 says, Sarvo Upanishado Gavo, Dugdha Gopal Nandana, Partho Vatsa, Sudhir Bhokta, Dugdham Gita Mritam Mahat. It means Sarvo Upanishad Gavo. It means all the Upanishad are like cows. And Dugdha is a milker. Who is the milker? Gopal Nandana, that is Krishna, the son of the cowherd. Partho is Arjun. Partho Vats, and Partho Arjun is the calf. And Sudhir Bhokta, all the wise people are the ones who drink. What do they drink? Gita Mritam Mahat. They are drinking the nectar of Bhagavad Gita, the supreme essence. So this is what Shankaracharya quotes in the glory in his Gita Mahatmya, the glories of Bhagavad Gita. Now, so this tells from Shankaracharya that Bhagavad Gita is the essence of all the Upanishads, and Bhagavad Gita as part of Mahabharat Bhishma Parva is the foundational text in understanding the various aspects of Indian knowledge systems: philosophical, psychological, ethical, science, leadership and society, spiritual dimension, etc. You can find all these in Bhagavad Gita. And what I have taken is a problem which is common for all, which is suffering. I think when you think about suffering, you see that across world there is suffering, and I'm sure all of us in one time in our life we would have asked, why me? Why is this happening to me only? Right? ये केवल मेरे साथ क्यों होता है? शुधु अमार साथ केनो होए? Right? I'm sure all of us would have faced this and have asked this question. Also, many times we think that, oh, this person, he's so great. Why bad things happen to good people? I think this is a very common things that we see around, and we ask, अच्छे लोगों के साथ बुरी चीज कैसे हो सकती है? This person is so great. He has been so nice. But then why is he suffering so well, so much, right? Or we can say in Bengali, ভালো মানুষদের জন্যে কেন খারাপ ঘটে, right? So I'm sorry, I don't know Bengali, but then I'm trying to put that. So this is something which is common, and we can, all of us can see that this happens in our life. And this also happened with Arjun some 5,000 years ago, right? Arjun, the starting, how Bhagavad Gita was spoken by Krishna, it all started when, with after all the atrocities that has been faced by the Pandavas, and they were all ready now to fight, and it was the battlefield of Kurukshetra, where both the Pandavas and Kauravas, they were ready to fight. And then Arjun requests Krishna that I want to see who all are there ready to fight with me. Let me go, show me who all are there. And Krishna very smartly took the chariot and put that in front of Bhishma Pitama and Dronacharya. That was Krishna's strategy, because he wanted to tell Bhagavad Gita to all of us. So intentionally he took the chariot and took Arjun in front of Bhishma Pitama and Dronacharya. Now, looking at Bhishma Pitama and Dronacharya, Arjun lost his composure. He lost his composure. Arjun was not an ordinary person like you and me. He was a great warrior, and he was a very, very renowned warrior. He had won many battles and has actually got lots of shastras from lot of devatas, right? And he also once Shiva wanted to challenge, to see the valor of Arjun, and he actually challenged Arjun by disguising himself as a hunter, Kirita. And then Arjun was actually fought with Shiva, and Shiva was so pleased to see the valor in Arjun, to see how great fighter Arjun was, that he actually gifted him with Pashupata Astra, right? That's how he got it. So such a great warrior, even he got into anxiety. Even he was compassionate. And not only compassionate, as Bhagavad Gita says, that his limbs and body started trembling when he saw that he's standing in front of Bhishma Pitama and Dronacharya. He's the favorite grandchild of Bhishma Pitama, and he's the favorite student of Dronacharya, and they all are standing in front of him, and he knows the time he takes up his Gandiva, none of them will be alive. And now his mouth started drying up, and his Gandiv, it started slipping from his body, and he was unable to stand. He was trembling, his body was trembling, and he was worried about the sinful reactions that he's going to have when he'll kill all the cousins, all the brothers, all the grandchild who was still standing in the other side of the Kauravas ready to fight. He was worried, what will happen if I fight and all these men who are standing there, they will die, the entire family traditions will go. And then he was in so much in anxiety, so much in worry that he refused to fight. He says, "Oh Krishna, it's better for me to live by begging than fighting and killing all of this." He knew if he picks up Gandhi, none of them will be alive, and he never wanted that. He was in indecision. He could not decide. He says, "Oh Krishna, I'm ready. Being a Kshatriya, he actually left his Gandhi, he left his bow. And then the only good thing that he did at that point of time, in that stage when he could not do anything, he's trembling, anxiety, suffering, and he's saying, "Oh Krishna, now I'm fully surrendered to you. Please tell me what I should do." And all of us, many of us, when we are suffering, when we are in that situation, we are in mental anxiety, we actually lose our balance. We don't know what is right, what is wrong. And we need an answer, we need a decision. And what Arjun did, he surrendered to Krishna and said, "Please show me the way. Please tell me what is right and what is wrong." And then Krishna helped him. And that is the point he started Gita, he started speaking. And that is today is Bhagavad Gita, right? So the sufferings that Arjun had 5,000 years, we all suffer in some or a different way. And the knowledge that Krishna shared 5,000 years ago is still very much valid in today's modern situation, the sufferings, the anxiety that we all face, right? So let us take one of the answers that Krishna gave to Arjun. Now, Krishna said, he says that this world, it is dukhalayam ashashvatam. He says, Krishna said that this world, this material world is dukhalayam ashashvatam. Dukhalay. What is dukhalay? I'm sure all of you understand. Just like we have pustakale, which is library, or we have vidyalay, where we all go to study. Alay is the home. So dukhalay is nothing, but it is the home of miseries. So this material world is nothing, but it is the home of miseries. And it is ashashvatam. It is not eternal. It is ashashvatam. Ashashvatam means it is temporary. So the world in which we all are, this is what Krishna defined it. He says it is dukhalayam ashashvatam. And very natural, if we are in dukhalay, then we will suffer, right? So that goes without saying that dukhalay means it will come miseries to us, right? So this is how Krishna defined this material world. Then the question is, if this is dukhalay ashashvatam, then why are we in this world, right? And the answer is, we are in this world because of our karmas. It is the karma because of which we all are here. It is our desire which propelled us to be here. And today we are here and we are suffering, right? Now, we all have read science probably, and we would have heard famous laws of Newton laws, which says every action has a reaction, right? That is Newton laws, and that is for, he talks from a science perspective for objects. Whatever action that has happened, it has equal and opposite reaction, right? Now, this was actually spoken by Krishna some 5,000 years ago about the activity, about the humans. Just like whatever action that we do, has an equal and opposite reaction. And it depends upon what action we do. And Krishna says that our karma is the cause of our bondage. Our karma is the cause of bondage. He defines in chapter 3, shlok 9, he says, Lokoyam karma bandhana. Lok is this slok, this whole planet is karma bandhana. It is basically work causes bondage in this material world. Then in second chapter he defines karma bandhan prahasyasi. He says, free yourself from the bondage of works. So he has used the word karma bandhan multiple times in Bhagavad Gita. And he says that this karma causes bondage. Let us understand how our activities actually causes a bondage. So I will try to explain by an example. So we all know about bank. And in bank, what do? We go and keep our money, right? We go and keep our money. Similarly, the karmas that we do, the activity that we do is also get accumulated in a bank. We can equate it to a bank. And in this bank, we have balance of good karma and a balance of bad karma. So we have two different bank balance, which is a good karma bank balance and a bad karma bank balance. And Krishna has defined good karma in chapter 16 from 1 to 3. It says charity, compassion, forgiveness. Some of them you can say feeding people, honesty, austerity, performing yajna, building hospitals, they all comes under good karma, right? They are pious deeds. But there are karmas that we do, which is lying, cheating, stealing, not doing our duty as per our dharma. We don't do our duty properly as per our dharma. Greed, lust, envy, jealousy, killing innocent beings, gambling, anger, intoxication, harming others. These are some of the bad karmas. And Krishna defines in chapter 4, he calls this vikarma. Vikarma, whatever vikarma that we do, it says bodhayam cha vikarma, it's called forbidden action. And whatever forbidden action we get involved in, the result of that is sins. So what we do, when we do a good karma, that is a pious deeds, we get a positive bank balance. And when we do bad karma, which is vikarma, or when we do sins, then we accumulate a sin, a bank balance of sin. Now, unfortunately, if we do more good karma, that does not cancel the sins that we have done. We have to suffer for the sins that we have done, and we have to enjoy the pious deeds we have done. So basically, we take birth again, so that if we have done a pious karma, then we have to take birth again, or in the same lifetime we will enjoy. But if we have done sins, then either in the next life or in some lifetime we will have to suffer, or even in this lifetime. It all depends upon the seeds that we are sowing. So this is how the bank balance of karma actually works. And then because of this bank balance, what happens? All the sins that leads to repeated birth and death. It leads to repeated birth and death, and that is what Krishna defines in chapter number 16, 19th and 20th shlok. He says this will happen. It will lead to repeated, and that's how we are getting bound in this cycle of birth and death. But whatever pious deeds we do, we also call it in the mode of goodness, in the mode of passion, in the mode of ignorance, right? So in the mode of goodness, whatever good things we are doing, actually what happens? It actually results into pious activities, and we are enjoying because of those good karmas that we are doing, and we are suffering because of the sins that we have done. And Garud Puran also talks about prarabdha karma. Prarabdha karma is one that we are actually bearing the fruit in this life at this point of time. So it happens like that. the karma. Karma, we can imagine, is like a seed. It's like a seed that we sow. Now, when we sow a seed, it depends upon the seed, the type of seed that we are sowing. Some of the seeds, they actually fructify easily. It, like, it can fructify in some time, and some of the seeds, it takes years and years to have the fruits. Maybe if you put a mango tree, it'll take time before the tree becomes big and then the fruit will come. But if I want to put a flower seed, maybe in that particular season itself we can get a flower, right? So what happens is, based on the activity that we have done, we can compare the activity to the seed, and based on the activity that we have done, the seed gets sown. If it has a small lifetime of fructification, we will bear it in this very lifetime. But in case it is something which it needs lot of other intricacies to be looked at, then what will happen? It will actually born into after multiple lifetime, right? And I wanted to analyze this laws of karma, taking the story of Dhritarashtra and his 100 sons, right? So we all know Dhritarashtra. He was the father of Kauravas and he had 100 sons. And why it happened, what happened with Dhritarashtra? Let's see the story or his past life karma as per our Bhavishya Puran. So Dhritarashtra was a hunter, and he had gone to the forest. He was in a forest, and he was actually was hunting. And since he missed the male bird, he saw the nest with 100 baby birds, and he actually killed all of them alive. Yeah. Now he got cursed. He got cursed by the dying father that you will also die one day, and all your 100 sons will actually die in front of your eyes. The action he did, killing innocent beings, was vikarma, and he suffered. Those, Krishna says in the 19th shlok of 16th chapter, he says, those who are envious and cruel, who are the lowest among men, I purposely cast into the ocean of material existence, into various demoniac species of life. So they get the behavior of demoniac behavior they get. Now, the question is, was Dhritarashtra demon? And Krishna replies about who is divine, he who is demon, in the 16th chapter of Bhagavad Gita. He says, in the 7th shlok, he says, Pravittim cha nivrittim cha, jana na vidurasura, na shocham na pichacharo, na satyam teshu vidyate. Krishna says that those who are demoniac, pravrittim cha nivrittim cha, they don't know what is to be done and what is not to be done. Na shocham, they are neither clean, na cha acharo, acharo means behavior. They have no proper behaviors. Neither satyam, neither they are truthful. So these are the characteristics when we see, then we can think they are the one Krishna defines as the demonic qualities. We think demon as someone having horns, someone whose teeth are long. No, demon are not the people, are always characterized by people having horns or having long teeth. Demonic is a behavior, and by their behavior you know whether this person is divine or demonic. If they are demoniac, you will see there will be no truth, no proper behavior, no cleanliness. They don't know what should be done, what should not be done. At any point of time, they can do anything. They are, so that these are characteristics that is defined by Krishna, and he says that is the by what do you call it, by the behaviors people are defined as divine or demonic, not by the looks, right? So this is what Krishna explains, and we saw that Dhritarashtra was looking at all these things. He had a demonic behavior, and he did suffer, right? So the question is, yes, we are suffering. We understand it is because of our karma. Then what is the solution for it? We do act, we have to act, like we are born as human, we are in this material world, we are going to do activity. So one of the options that Krishna explains is called Nishkam Karma Yoga. Nishkam Karma Yoga means dutifully work with detachment to results, which is explained in Bhagavad Gita 2.47. Krishna says, do your work dutifully, honestly, but don't be attached to results. Then he says, renounce attachment to success and failure. Keep them equal. Don't be extremely happy if you succeed, and don't be extremely sad when you fail. And then he says, reject all abominable actions. Reject all abominable actions, right? So now let's look at these 3 points in detail. So in chapter 247, Krishna says, dutifully work with detachment to results. And I think all of us must have heard the shlok, karmaniye vadika raste ma phaleshu kadachana. Karmaniye vadika raste means you have the right to perform your prescribed duty. Ma phaleshu kadachana, but you are not entitled to the fruits of action, right? But we normally don't go into detail about the second line of this shlok, which says, Ma karma far hetur bhur, ma te sangostav karne. Ma karma fal hetur bhur means never consider yourself to be the cause of the result of your activity. Why Krishna is saying that do your duty, but don't be entitled to the results. Why Krishna says? Because don't consider yourself only to be the cause of the activity. We think, we study, we get good results, we are very happy. I think I did it, and we all have this I. Because of me it happened. And that is something which is actually very, very wrong. Because whatever results happen, it is not only because of the current activity that is done. It can be because of your future, because of your past karmas. It is also because of the karmas which is with whom you are intertwined. Your husband, your wife, your parents, your mother would have done lot of penance, because of which today, one may be a great person. It may be because of the penance done by your parents, right? So Krishna says that do your duty. We all should be focused and do our prescribed duty. But we should not, because I have done it, this is the result and it belongs to me. That is a behavior which Krishna says, leave it, because it is not only because of you. Ma karma fal hedubhi. Never consider yourself the cause of the result of activities. Maybe you are very brilliant, you have done very good thing, right? But maybe your score has come very less, or something, outcome that you are expecting, you have really, you have failed. It was not just because of the effort that has been put. It was not because you did very well, you studied very well, and you did not get a promotion. Yeah, you really performed very well in your office, but you did not get a promotion. It is not because of that. It is the karmas are because of multiple causes. And Krishna says that the intricacies of karma are so difficult, so hard to understand, that it is, leave it. What you need to do? Do your duty. And for all of us, do our duty and detach ourselves to results. Never consider yourself to be the cause of the result of activity, and never be attached to not doing your duty. What is the use? Everything is karma. I have done it already. So what? I know this is what will happen. Whatever I have done in past life, no. That is not right. Because never be attached to not doing your duty. We have to do our duty honestly, because whatever we are doing, if we don't do our duty honestly, that is also inaction, and that also causes sins. That's why it's very, very important that we do our duty honestly, without detaching ourselves from the results, and then don't consider ourselves to be the only cause of the result that we get. But whatever happens, we have to do our duty, continue our doing duty honestly, right? So Krishna is teaching Arjun to act without greed, fear or ego, and renounce the outcome. Yeah. Then Krishna says, renounce attachment to success and failure. Output, when we have, in any circumstances, we say, as a student, we have done a lot of work, but then, I didn't succeed. In office, I have done a lot of hard work, met all the KPIs that were given, but I did not get promotion, right? What happens? Renounce attachment to success and failure. Krishna says, yogastha. Yogastha means be equipoised. Yogastha kuru karmani. Be situated in yoga. Yogastha kuru karmani. Sangam tyaktva dhananjaya. Siddhyam samo bhutva. Samatvam yoga uchyate. Krishna says, perform your duty equipoised, O Arjun, abandoning all attachment to success and failure. Whatever happens, whether you succeed or failure, don't worry. Don't look at that. Just be do the work because this is your duty, this is my duty, and I need to do that. With that equipoised nature, we need to continue working on. This is Nishkam Karma Yoga. And then Krishna says, Durena, reject all abominable actions. Durena haram karma buddhi yoga Dhananjay. O Dhananjay, O Arjun, keep all the abominable actions. We talked about lot of things which was coming under sins. We have to keep all objections, we have to reject all. And we have to, so O Dhananjay, keep all abominable activities far distance by devotional service. So this is what Krishna talks about Nishkam Karma Yoga. And he says, if we do that, if we knowing this, if we start focusing on Nishkam Karma Yoga, then what will I achieve? We'll be free from stress and suffering. If I have not got promotion, if I have not scored very good marks, I know I have done my duty. I did my duty, but then my result is not only a direct proportional to the effort I have put, because there are multiple causes which influences my outcome. It is not only because of me. And when we have that realization, when we have actually understood and realized it, then what happens? It frees us from stress and sufferings because of that, right? Then what happens? If we live our life with a focus to Nishkam Karma Yoga, then what will happen? We are not creating, we are not creating karma which is vikarma, and that will actually stop us from the future bondage and sufferings, right? It will purify our heart from lust, greed and ego. When we are purified, we can actually move towards the path of liberation. It will help us. The more purified our heart is, the more we will be able to focus and understand Bhagavad Gita and all our scriptures, because to understand our scriptures, it is very, very important how pure I am by heart, by conscious how pure I am. And the more pure my heart is, what will happen? It will enable me to actually understand the scriptures. And when we understand our scripture, we are actually moving forward in the path towards liberation. And it will also help us to build connection with God. So this is what we'll achieve if we do the Nishkam Karma Yoga. Yeah. And I think a very, very normal question that will follow after this karma logic, karma cycle that we talked about. How does this karma get transferred from one life to another life, right? How does it actually happen? What is this process that follows, that my karma actually comes to my next life and it is known, and then I do and it affects me? So I would also like to take this point, that how does karma gets transferred from one life to another life, and as explained by Krishna in Bhagavad Gita. And this is the science of soul. That is the science of soul, right? A very important question is to understand, who am I? What is my real identity? It's a very, very deep question, and I'm sure all of us do think about it once in our lifetime. Who am I? What is my real identity? Why am I here? Yeah, and especially when we are suffering, these are the questions that comes to our mind. What we do, we all think that this body, whatever we have, this is what we are. And Krishna explains that this what we are, Sushmita sitting in front of you, I'm just wearing a body of Sushmita today. So I'm Sushmita here sitting in front of you. That is not my real identity. Maybe in last life I was Lakshmi, and my future life I'll become someone else. I don't know. Right? So this body is just like a cloth, it's just like a shirt. You know, we wear a shirt today, and when the shirt gets dirty, what do? I remove the shirt. And similarly, Krishna explains that this is a body that Sushmita, what is the person called Sushmita is wearing today. And what will happen? When I die, I will leave this body and I'll enter into another body, and it will name someone else, right? So what I am, my real identity is not Sushmita, this body, but my real identity is my soul, which is eternal. And Krishna in 2nd chapter describes in detail about who am I, right? So it is the soul, and it is the soul which carries, which has the impressions, which carries everything from one body to another, and that is my real identity. And the day, so unfortunately, what we all do, we all live for this body. Whatever work we do is for this body that I am wearing today, right? All my activities, all my all my hard work, all my earnings, everything in our lifetime, we only focus on this body which is called Shushmita, or whatever body you are wearing today, right? What we really forget in our life is that we are not bought this body. This is just a medium for us to move from one to live in this material world for some time. Our real identity is our soul, and unfortunately we don't do much thing for our soul. We don't do much thing. We don't invest time for our soul. We look only for our body. We work for our body. We make food for our body. We take care of all the the relatives, the thing that we have in our body. We buy clothes for our body. But the real person behind this body, which is me, which is I, which is the soul, we forget to take care of that, and that is why we suffer, because we don't have time to spend on that one which we are. That is our real identity. It is not this body which is Shushmita, or whatever body we are wearing today, right? So this is the science of soul that Krishna explains in detail in the 2nd chapter. So we are not the body but the soul, and Krishna says, just like all of us, we have grown from boyhood or girlhood to a youth, and then to an old age, and then I will change this body from Sushmita to some other body. So Krishna explains this very nicely in the 13th shlok of 2nd chapter. He says, just like the soul inside the body grows from boyhood, youth to old age, similarly after that the soul moves to another body, and that is the journey of the soul. It keeps on moving, keeps on moving, keeps on moving eternally till it becomes liberated or free, right? So the question is, so this is what is the journey of the soul. And then Krishna explains in the 7th chapter, the 4th shlok, Krishna explains that this body that I talked about, he says first that this body is made up of 24 elements. Those elements are Prakriti, they are dead elements. They are not alive, they are not living. And then he says that the body is made of 24 elements, but the thing is, there are 5 gross elements and 3 gross subtle elements. The 5 gross elements are earth, water, fire, air and ether. That is what this body that we see, which we are externally able to see, is made up of. These are the 5 gross body, and actually there is another 3 gross body, which is called subtle, which we can't see. That is called mind, intelligence and ego, false ego. So these are the 3 things which is called subtle elements. That is also there. Again, so what happens when we die? All of us know what is the difference between a living body and a dead body. The difference between a living body and a dead body is about the soul, right? When someone is living and a dead, the only difference is the body remains as is. There's nothing changed in the body. The only thing is what the living body could do earlier, the dead body cannot do, because the soul has moved out, right? So when we die, what happens? The gross element, which is the gross body, which is made up of earth, water, fire and ether, remains. And what do? We go and burn it, and it again goes and meet back into the material substance. It goes and meet in the material substance. But the subtle elements, which is mind, intelligence, false ego, that is the one that carries our soul from this body to the next body. And this is explained in the 15th shlok, 15th chapter and the 8th shlok of Bhagavad Gita. And Krishna says that what happens? He says, just like air. What happens? Just like air, wind, when it is moving, what happens? When it is moving from from above a garden, it will carry the smell of the flowers and will move on. But the flowers are left behind. It only carries the smell, along with it, and then it moves on. Similarly, the soul just carry the subtle body, which is the subtle body only carries the soul, that is the mind, intelligence, and ego, with that, and moves on to the another body. So similarly, the soul leaves just like air takes up the aroma from when it passes from a garden of flowers and leave behind a physical flower. Similarly, the soul leaves the gross body and moves to another body along with the subtle body, that is mind, intelligence, false ego. And then the activities that we have done are called our mental impressions, which are in mind. They are kept as mental impressions in whatever we do, whatever desires are, when we are dying, whatever our desires are, they all are impression in the mind. And then it is along with the soul it goes, and that is how our sanskars are made, and these mental impressions are sanskars, and that desires are taken to the next life. Sometimes we wonder, this young child, how come this child knows this playing music so well? How come he is a born brilliant? Actually, it is because of the sanskars which the person had in earlier life, and is it carrying to the next life, right? So if I have to talk about the science of soul, the karma, the actions that we do, they are performed with desires, and that they create our karma. And then we have sanskars, that impressions. The mental impressions are stored in the subtle body, mind, intelligence, ego. Then we have death, and the gross body dies, and subtle body carries soul and karmic impressions. And then we have rebirth, new body assigned based on past karma and desires. And then karma fructation, prarabdha karma, based on the seed. When the seed of our sins or of our pious deeds matures, what happens? It unfolds as a life events in this new body. Yeah. So this is how our karma moves from one body to another. So this is what I wanted to take this today in today's class about how about sufferings. Why do we suffer, and how our karma gets moved from one life to another. So with this, I will end my today's session. I am open to question answers, so you can ask me any question that you have.
Ma'am, I wish to extend my hearty welcome to you, and I thank you for explaining Bhagavad Gita in a very lucid terms. Ma'am, I have one observation. It's more like my observation, and I wish to hear your opinion on that. Actually, in chapter 11 of Bhagavad Gita, Sri Krishna gives us the idea that he himself is the Kal. So if he is the soul time, and he is the destroyer and protector of time also. And ma'am, at the same time, we got to know later times that Sri Krishna was being cursed by Gandhari, and as a result, after the Kurukshetra war and everything, he was being killed by a hunter who assumed him to be a bluebird. So being the destroyer, being the protector, being himself the Kala, he is also subject in the hands of this Mahakal. So ma'am, this is the basic paradox within Bhagavad Gita as far as I think. So how do you address this issue? What is your opinion on that?
Very good question, and I really appreciate you. You must read the Bhagavad Gita chapter 4, and the shlok number is 9. It says, Janma karmcha me divyam. He says, Jan means Krishna takes birth, he appears. So the right, when you say appearance, Janma is appearance. Janma karma, karma means activity. Krishna says, Janma karmcha me divyam. My appearance and my activities are divine. Janma karmcha me divyam. Divyam is divine. My appearance and my activities are divyam. And he says that those who can understand that, they will never take birth in this life again. So what you see is you have to really understand. It is a very big explanation, and I have so I would just say, please read the explanation of chapter 4, shlok number 9, which says Janma charma me jivyam evam yo veti tattvadam. After taking birth, that person will not come again. So what you said, so it is, remember, when Krishna is appearing, why did he appear? He appeared because Brahmaji and all the Devtas, they went and requested him to appear. Why? And he says, when do I appear? Paritranaya sadhunam vinashaya duskritam. Anytime, whenever whenever there is a, whenever there's a rise in irreligion, yeah, adharma, yeah, so to kill adharma and to protect my devotees, paritranaya sadhunam. Sadhuna means good people, to protect them, to protect the good people, and to vinashaya dushkritam, and to kill the miscreants. I come, and I come not only once, and I'll come again and again. And then in fourth chapter, Krishna says, just to give you your answer, some of the things from that one, Krishna says, in the fourth chapter, Krishna says, when Arjun is when Krishna is talking to Arjun about the Bhagavad Gita, and he says, this is the knowledge I am not speaking for the first time. I have spoken this knowledge some millions and years ago to Ikshwa, to Vivaswan. I have spoken this to Vivaswan some millions of years ago, the sun god. And Arjun is perplexed. How can you be speaking this knowledge to Vivaswan, who was existing, the sun god, some millions of years ago? You and me are almost of the similar age. And Krishna says, remember Arjun, you and I takes birth multiple times. I remember everything, but you don't, right? So he's God. He's beyond. It is he's creating a drama. He comes, his appearance is a drama. He comes so that we all, and he creates these pastimes. These what we are talking about, what stories Gandhari cursing, they are the pastimes he has created so that all of us can talk about it. It says, when we say Krishna Katha, all of this, our heart becomes pious, and when we become pious, we can understand him better. Yeah, so that is the answer to it. So I would really request you to read Bhagavatam to understand more, and read Bhagavad Gita under a spiritual master, because a spiritual master understands and will help you to understand things in detail. I also take classes on Bhagavad Gita every Saturday evening, and I have a YouTube channel.
Which is the link, ma'am? Is it on YouTube or?
It is on YouTube, and you can. I'll share my link if Dr. Kamal permits that. I can share the link in the WhatsApp, and you all can join, because So that's it. Any other questions?
No, ma'am. Thank you so much for this lucid explanation.
Thank you.
I have more of a comment. Tuli, may I
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Shushmita ji, I am Professor Ena Rai Banerjee. I am a professor of zoology in Calcutta University, and I have been following some of the lectures in this workshop. So I have a comment that the karmophal that you are saying, karma, it can be explained in terms of systems biology, that everything is connected to everything else, and it is a mathematically, biologically, incidentally proven theory that everything is connected to everything else.
Absolutely.
So that we do at one corner of the world will affect another corner of the world, and whatever we do, say on planet Earth, which is a speck of dust, is likely to affect everything else, following principles of physics. And what I said before follows the principles of biology. So this is my take. And the other is in the Brahma, Vishnu, Maheshwar concept. As a biologist, yesterday during my lecture also I reinforced that it is all about balance. So the creator is Brahma, and the destroyer is Shiv, and everything is kept in a balance by Vishnu, who is Krishna. And in all biological systems, you will see that things operate even stochastically. Biological incidents work to maintain a balance. And that balance is all that one endeavors to achieve any form of life. And if that balance overshoots that range, it is destroyed. So these are very pragmatic truths that have been written in the Mahabharata and in our epics, and they indeed follow certain laws.
Absolutely.
So apart from the religiosity and the spirituality and the trust, it is all very explicable by how events, so we call it the event horizon. So things occurring. over millions of years in terms of evolution. And if there is a Krishna, then it is how things work in the macro or the micro evolutionary perspective, and indeed how things manifest through a series of events is somehow controlling each other. So that's just a comment I wanted to offer.
Thank you, thank you. That's nice to know. Yeah, thank you. Yes, Tuli ma'am. You're on mute. I can't hear you.
Sorry, I have a question. It might sound a little naive. It's basically about Gita and its practical applications in college. Like most of the time, we hear that in corporate world they have special sessions where the workers are the people who are working in corporates. They have these special seminars where Gita is being taught, and how to cope with life, stress, deadline, all those things. In college, we have counselors where when students face something, we ask them to go to the counselors, but before they go to the counselors, sometimes they are asked to come to the assigned mentors, college professors in the department. They might, help them somehow with their problems, issues, or any kind of queries outside of college curriculum. So, but most of the time, in our country and these generation of students that we are talking about, when they come to us, there is a kind of I personally believe for Gita or any kind of spiritual text, you need a certain kind of maturity and a kind of acceptance. You can't start from no. You have to have a belief or a small door left open for us to enter and to have that discourse. But most of the time, what I face is students have that. If I talk about Gita, the first thing they will take a step back. Like I am talking about religion or spirituality, I am not handling their problems. But I feel Gita has so many things inside it to address the issues that they have. So I am trying to understand what can be a stepping ground or a platform where I can start that discourse. Like can you suggest me anything?
I would say, since we are just running out of time, 10:45 is my time. So ma'am, I'll tell you one thing. I can very much relate to you. Unfortunately, in our country, we don't have we don't have places or schools where we are taught, or even at home where they are taught our scriptures, right? Because our scriptures has everything, and if we follow that, then that is the right way, and it should be taught from very, very beginning, right? Rather, we say the garbhadhara sanskar before the parents plans for conception. They should actually do prayers and then plan for conception. That is our sanskars, right? So what I would say is, in modern people, when you are when say you understand Gita and you know that Gita is going to benefit them, what I do, what I follow, I don't take the name of Gita, but I give them the knowledge of Gita, because every problem can be sorted out. As soon as you say Gita, Bhagavatam, they get reacted because they have not been exposed to it. So the easiest way to handle will be, you understand, being a knower, that this can be solved. So let them speak about it. Don't say Gita says that, Ramayana says that, because that will put them off. They have not been brought up, or they have not been exposed to that environment. If someone has got exposed, you can always use it. So use the teaching to train them without taking the name. And then when they are following that, and they have started listening to you, because as soon as you stay there, they will switch you off. Don't go to this ma'am, she will talk about Ramayana or Bhagavad Gita or scriptures. Don't go. So don't do that. So tell them, teach them the values without taking the name, and then when they start listening to you, then slowly you can show them, look at this shlok, look at this, how this story happens, and use stories to train them. That is a very powerful media. We have so many stories in our Purans and Bhagavatam. Use those stories as a moral to teach them.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you. I will kind of use this suggestion. Next time I face this kind of problem.
I will share my email. I'll share my link, and I'll share. You can contact me, and we can always talk about it. Yeah.
Okay,
thank you.
Do share.
Sure. Any other questions? We have 3 more minutes to go. Oh, sorry. It's time. I think 10:30, right? Dr. Kamal.
I request Dr. Tuli Roy just to give a vote of thanks to Madam, and it will be very nice